Today, I have returned as the President of a free people.
In my own view, the part of the speech of the former President Cory about martial law and her predecessor is driven by subjective basis, bias, and tainted with falsity. She viewed the Philippines under the martial law as faithless and brazen act of murder. Also, she described her predecessor as a president turned dictator, a traitor to his oath, a human rights violator, and a fraud. Clearly, these descriptions were all negative and I think were just a mere accusations. She claimed that her husband took a very big part in claiming the freedom of the Filipinos. Her descriptions of what Ninoy did for the Philippines was a pure greatness, which was a big contrast on how she depicted Marcos and the martial law. Honestly, the huge foreign debt left by the Marcos regime was very questionable, and Mrs. Aquino said that the Filipinos never benefited from it, which is not partly true. Clearly, she turned a blind eye to those infrastructures and projects that the Marcos government made with the use of the part of that debt, and these are until today are very useful for Filipinos. For me, she really presented her predecessor as a villain and claimed the heroic deeds of her husband and her for the Philippines, which is obviously biased. Yes, Marcos had done wrong, but dismissing his accomplishments and contributions for our country is very unfair. As others have said, martial law is good only for the law-abiding citizens. Thank you.
Before I give my opinion on Cory Aquino's speech, first let's start with basic understanding of who Cory Aquino is. Her full name is Maria Corazon Quazon Aquino, and she was born in Tarlac Province on January 25, 1933. She is the first female president and 11th president of the Philippines. On September 18, 1986, when former President Aquino gave her speech to the U.S. Congress. When her husband died, she ran for president and won the election, serving as president from 1986 to 1992, during which time she made friendship with Americans. President Aquino described her husband's sacrifices on behalf of the country. Ninoy Aquino fight for democracy against President Marcos for the Filipinos' freedom. President Cory Aquino thanked her husband as well as 1,000 others, senators, publishers, and anyone else who has stood up of democracy.
So this is my reaction video about the speech of the former President Cory Aquino. I was listening and watching to the speech of the former President Cory Aquino. I felt like I was taken aback to the period the speaker was speaking. I felt connected to the one of freedom from oppression expressed by the speaker and the need from democracy. While listening to it, I realized how freedom is significant to a country and we should let our voice be heard. Like she said, the task had fallen on my shoulders to continue offering the democratic alternative to our people. She took the responsibilities in taking care and fighting the sake of freedom of the whole country. Also, she said that still we fought for honor, and if only for honor we shall pay. She emphasized that the fight that they started was not a nonsense one, that they, the Filipinos, put up a good fight against the administration.
So, Cory Aquino's speech started and was embellished with numerous references to her husband, former Senator Ninoy Aquino, whom the Filipino nation had designated as the poster boy for anti-Marcos movements. Her speech was focused on connecting Ninoy's struggle with that of the entire nation, while also connecting their family's history with the fate of the entire country. Cory Aquino appears to have the most faith and confidence in America. She invited the country to assist the Philippines in exercising its democratic rights. Looking from today's vantage point, it appears to be an open invitation for the former to assist, and later it will use for its own strategic purposes. As she mentioned in her speech, there is still no legitimate social and economic progression agenda. And it's so sad to think that there have been many claims made by our country's highest official, but some of those promises only have continued to stay as a promise.
The speech of Cory Aquino is a part of seeking sympathy from her listeners. She was trying to appeal to her American listeners that she was a grieved widow. Another is seeking help from the US, wherein she talked about the gargantuan foreign debt. But the main thing I observed in her speech is the part of her being an anti-Marcos. She talked about Marcos being a dictator, how Marcos trampled the Philippine democracy and jailed thousands.
This reaction video is refers to Corazon Aquino's speech during the U.S. Congress. On September 18, 1986, Corazon Aquino recently elected as President of the Philippines. She was named as the Time magazine's Women during her time. September 1986, when President Corazon Aquino visited the United States. She gave her speech before the joint session of the U.S. Congress. She sought help in addressing the $26 billion foreign debt during Marcos' regime. In her speech, she called the Americans to help the Philippines to achieve the freedom and democracy. She also managed to influence the votes to favor the $200 million financial aid towards to help the Philippines rebuilding the economy. Corazon Aquino's speech is a crucial event in the political and diplomatic history of the country because it has arguably cemented the legitimacy of the EDSA government after the U.S. Congress.
Hi, I'm Celso Salazar Jr. Today, I'm creating a reaction video about the speech of former President Corazon Aquino in the United States before the U.S. Congress. The speech provides insight into how Filipinos struggled to achieve freedom and how Filipinos' steadfast resistance has motivated Filipino revolutionaries in our current period. It also clarifies what actually transpired during Ninoy Aquino's presidency. The document describes Aquino's efforts to help the Philippines in achieving independence, the debt committed by previous government prior to Cory Aquino was addressed in the text.
Watching the speech of Cory Aquino, I realized that freedom is very significant for us Filipinos, and we should fight for our freedom, and we should voice out as one for our rights, like the People's Power Revolution that Cory Aquino did. And the Aquinos and the Marcoses has done something great for our country. And especially the dictatorship of Marcos has done nothing wrong for our country.
She acknowledged the obligation to look after and protesting for the country's freedom. But after defeating Marcos' conflict, the Philippines were still living with the consequences of his government's actions. This included a total foreign debt worth $26 billion and a communist struggle that developed from 500 armed guerrillas to 16,000 within Marcos' presidency. The country was only started long journey to recovery. As a result, by outlining the status of the country to Congress, she also made a plea for support or financial aid in restoring full democratic republic and rebuilding the country's economy.
Cory Aquino went to America to assist our country to maintain the liberty of the Philippines. She appears to possess the best confidence and trust in America that she invited the country to assist the Philippines in practicing its democracy. There are many people said that there is nothing changed at the time of the U.S. Congress in 1986. Sad to think there is plenty of promises by the highest person who involves in our country, but a number of promises still remain as a phrase or as simply as a promises. And we all know that Aquino is anti-Marcos movement because of martial law.
Former President of the Philippines, Corazon C. Aquino, she seems to have a similar mistake. However, when she decided that the Philippines would keep the 26 billion foreign debt incurred during Marcos' presidency, the reasoning was the sins we fought for honor.
She would also honor the Hajj foreign's debt, although its benefit never really reached us as a nation. What is more questionable is that after declaring that we will pay the debt, she immediately asked for help in achieving that.
Upon watching the speech of Cory Aquino before the U.S. Congress, she emphasized the character and the conviction of her late husband, that is Ninoy Aquino. And she was talking about the strong opposition of Ninoy Aquino about the dictatorship of Marcos. And she talked almost about 3 times that they had lost Aquino. And she also included in her speech all of the sufferings that Ninoy Aquino had experienced in the hands of the president, which is Ferdinand Marcos. Based on the speech of Cory, I can see that she connected the EDSA People Power Revolution to the death of her husband. She is also saying that if it is not because of the death of her husband, which she said that Ninoy Aquino is the pleasing sacrifice for the Filipino freedom, then it is impossible that EDSA revolution will happen, and she will not become the president. And because of the death of Ninoy Aquino, there are many people who sided them because they are claiming for what they call freedom and for their rights against the dictatorship of President Ferdinand Marcos. In her speech also, we can see that she introduced the democratic philosophy that she claimed as coming also from her husband. And based from what she said, the result of the snap election between her and Marcos was a fraud, and that she gained her presidency through people power. She uses the people power in order for her to get the position or to win the presidency election. And what really made her the president or the 11th president of the Philippines is that she was not elected. The controversial agenda of the speech of Cory Aquino before the U.S. Congress was about the peace, because during that time, the existence of communists in the country is too strong. But in the end of her speech, she was actually thanking the America for accommodating them for 3 years when they stayed there. She was also assuring the America that she wanted to restore democracy, and she was assuring that there is alliance between the Philippines and the America during her reign as the President of the Philippines. In that speech, we can already see some clues or agendas on what is the government she wants to make under her presidency, or simply saying that what kind of president or government she wanted to represent if she is the president of that time after the Marcos.